Dennis from Zynaptiq here at the NAMM show. Hi Sonicstate viewers, and we're showing our newest plugin, Wormhole. We've announced that a while back, but now we're actually done with it and it's going to be shipping soon, so check it out. What is it? It's a multi-effects processor that combines morphing with spectral warping, pitch shifting, frequency shifting, reverberation, delay, and all that sort of stuff into one thing that makes it really, really easy to create far out and heavily processed sounds really quickly at a super high quality. Let me show you what it sounds like. I'll start with showing it on voice, because it's great for making monster voices, robots, alien, demons, presidents, and all that sort of strange sounds. Here's some speech.
As, in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus had observed it at 2 different points of the chart.
I'll now add some demon factor to that.
As, in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus had observed it at 2 different points of the chart.
At 2 different points of the chart.
As, in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus had observed it.
It doesn't only do monsters and robots, it is the whole sci-fi spaceship ambience thing too, and really well. There's actually even a preset that just whatever you throw at it, it'll make that sort of ambience. It's called Anything to Dark Rumbly Drone. Let me show you what that turns that voice into. Now from there, having that ambience made, I can use the dry wet morphing to transition that gradually to the source and find intermediate sounds that have way more contour than they would without the morphing.
Had observed it at 2 different points of the chart. As, in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson.
As another example, there's a preset, one of my favorites is called Cybernetics Plant on Pluto. Similar approach, give me the spaceship ambience. And again with the morphing, I can make that
As, in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus had observed it at 2 different points of the chart.
So it's really great for anything that's sci-fi or far out. It doesn't only do that though, because how many sci-fi films do you do every year? Maybe none, maybe it doesn't, but that's about the max. No, it does the whole beautiful ambient music sweetening thing too. So as it has a very organic sounding pitch shifter that works very differently than any other pitch shifter, because it does not use delay lines, granular stuff, or FFTs. It excels actually at the things that you typically use your 1980s rack processor that keeps dying and keeps needing service for. So here's a little bit of guitar. Let me bring that level down because it's hotter than the speech. And now let's make that sound all Pat Metheny, Daniel Lenoir. And there's more extreme stuff too. Like there's my absolute favorite preset is Valentine Guitar Blur. it references, as people who like guitars will know, My Bloody Valentine, one of the best bands ever. And it sounds like this. And again, with the dry wet morphing, I can really adjust the amount of that very, very nicely. Okay, so that's for the sound. I urge you to try it out in the studio. It sounds really, really gorgeous. And it's very fast to use. Aside of the sound, let me maybe give a little bit more tech detail about the sections that this plugin has. On the left side, over here, is the warping section. What does that do? It tilts and warps and rotates the spectrum, but unlike other spectral processes, it does not actually use an FFT or a resynthesizer of some sort. No, it's a time domain process, meaning it sounds super crisp and tight at all times. No warbliness, no blurring out. That's also the part that does the C3PO style resonator thing with the holes control here. Maybe let me show you that on its own, on that speech. So here's my speech again.
As in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus.
Now let me play with the warp section a little bit.
On an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus had observed it at 2 different points of the chart.
As in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus had observed it at 2 different points of the chart.
As in an interval of 3 days. Had observed it at 2 different points of the chart. As in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus had...
Now let me add some reverb to that. Yeah, that's the point where you start realizing why it's called the wormhole. So the reverb I was adding is a random hall type reverb as we use it in Morph and as we use it in the all pass section of the adaptiver. It's a very nice sounding hall reverb, but we actually have 2 of them. One is before the morphing, one is after the morphing, and you can have both of them on for 2 reverbs, because 2 reverbs is better than 1 reverb. And the way the random modulation works, they actually give more than you would get with one larger reverb. It's a very dense and nice texture you get. Third section is the pitch and frequency shifting section. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the pitch shifter works differently than others. Well, how does it work? Essentially, it's more complex than that, but essentially it takes hundreds and hundreds of frequency shifters, each of them locking onto one partial of the input, and then they're all shifted linearly by different amounts to replicate the behavior of a pitch shifter. As a result, it has a very coherent and tight sound, and using some of the buzzwords I typically avoid, it's very warm sounding and very analog sounding, whatever that means. Try it out, you'll see why I picked those words in this case. The frequency shifter is the most clean one I am aware of. So unlike almost all other designs I've tried, it has near 0 bleed of the carrier waveform and 0 bleed of the suppressed sideband. They're about 120 dB down, so you can actually use it with extreme settings without hearing annoying ringing tones and all the stuff that you'd expect from a ring modulator, but not from a frequency shifter. Try it in the studio, it's super nice. Now that the dry wet morph I showed earlier, what's the rationale for that? You know, because it lives where the dry wet control usually lives, up at the end of the plugin. Now when you do heavy processing to a sound like you're going to do with this, the result will be so far removed from the source that just blending them will not give you the desired effect of just like dialing back the intensity. You know, that's what you kind of want to do with the dry wet on that type of plugin, because they'll sound like two separate sounds. Now, using our morphing engine, it's actually the classic algorithm from our Morph 2 plugin to morph between the dry and the wet. You can actually shape the input to become the processed sound with all the intermediate stages that will all kind of conform to the amplitude envelope and the spectral footprint of the source way more closely. So as a result, the dry and the wet fuse into one sound, which goes a long way in making it sound realistic for that alien laser gun that's going to disintegrate your planet. Well, there's more. You can switch the ordering of the warp and the shifting section over here. You can pre-delay the wet path, or you can keep the wet in place and delay the dry path. You can do that invertedly for left and right. A couple of different pitch shifting modes, and more than I can really go into in this video. But let me show as a final example, because of the way that left-right inverted dry-wet delay thing works, and the way the pitch shifter works, you can do really, really beautiful micro-shifting type V-tuning effects. So here's that guitar again. Let's make it wide in a subtle way. Ranges from really subtle to less so. Check that in the studio. It's really beautiful for that little bit of bigness, you know. Yeah, that kind of sums it up. It's going to be VST audio units, RTAS, AX native on Mac and PC, mono in, stereo out, stereo in, stereo out, 32-bit, 64-bit, VST2 and VST3, like with adaptive reverb. All of our new stuff is going to support VST3 now. Shipping within the next 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how quickly I recover from this show and the jet lag. It's going to be one of our more affordable plugins, so it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg and a kidney to get hold of it. Well, that wouldn't be too bad. Well, no, it's going to be affordable. Pricing in detail to be announced. Thank you for watching, and check it out once it's shipping. Bye.